Welcome back to Ancient Aliens in Modern Times. So we're your hosts, Melanie Wild
and Stephanie Yelovich. Let's get into it, my friend.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this episode. We are already here on episode 5, which is crazy. Yeah, we are. I know, and I'm like so pumped that we're sticking to our schedule and things are coming out on time. And yeah, I don't know, we're getting really good feedback. It feels really good.
Agreed. And swearing less.
Doing my best, Mom. Doing my best. Okay, so last week we spoke about the creation stories from the Atlantean perspective, as well as the Gnostic perspective. So this episode, we're going to continue on the creation story, and we're going to get into the Anunnaki and comparing that with some biblical text, as well as Steph's going to tell us about the Egyptian stuff. And hopefully, yeah, we're going to find some crossovers.
Well, it's cool because I feel like I'm already, even just in my own research, finding the overlap. And so I think that's really exciting, and why I want to, and when we present these, I want to give you Cole's notes of just whacked my pencil. I want to give you Cole's notes of the Egyptian story so that we can really break things down and just kind of talk about where that overlap is, right?
Yeah, and like I find a lot of overlap between different like historical stories like this is you find the overlap a lot in the characters, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they'll have different names, but they'll have the same behaviors, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm excited. And okay, so I am going to start with the Anunnaki story. And where I'm pulling this information from is Zecharia Sitchin's body of work. Now, Zecharia Sitchin, he wrote his first book in the 70s, and then he wrote many, many, many after that,
Mm.
um, up until I think his last book came out in like 2007, and then he passed away in 2010.
Mm.
So I'm just going to tell you where he pulled his information from because um, it's not
Oh,
like it shouldn't be a surprise that he's a controversial
yeah.
subject in
Yes.
theologian. Yeah,
May I share a disclaimer before you hop in?
yeah, do it.
Just to speak about exactly what you're about to kinda go into. A lot of the reasons why the controversy, I think, is because a lot of these creation stories come from multiple different sources, in the sense that, the Egyptian story, we're pulling from the pyramid texts, we're pulling from the Book of the Dead, we're pulling from, like, religious scrolls, we're also pulling from temple walls. Right? So I know,
Right.
Zachary Sitchin obviously had his job cut out for him. And so I think that's where a lot of people, we were discussing this earlier, get overwhelmed. Like I was overwhelmed last night doing my research because there's so much to put together. And essentially what he's doing is what we're doing on this podcast. He found all
Totally.
up, and then now I will give it back to you, Mel, to give us the
Yeah,
list
and like
pulled from.
and that's exactly what I think like a huge basis of what this podcast is, not just this episode, but like even past episodes and moving forward is that we're really just trying to pull in for the listener all of the research that it takes to really understand where we come from, because I think in order to know where we're going, we got to know where we came from. And yeah, and so and there's just so much information, it's really hard to do. So I'm gonna just list a few of the places that Zecharia Sitchin was getting his knowledge from.
Hmm.
And those included the Enuma Elish, which is the Babylonian creation epic. This is written on tablets, clay tablets. He pulled information from the Atrahasis epic, which is another flood story. He pulled information from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is also another flood story. And there's some cool modern day connections to Gilgamesh if you go into the Epstein files.
Mm,
Um, yeah, which I could go on a side tangent right now about, but I will save that for another day. It's
okay.
very dark, obviously.
Ooh,
And then the Zecharia Sitchin coming back to he was pulling information from the Sumerian kings list, also tablets written in stone, the Eridu Genesis, another flood story, the cylinder seals and the cuneiform tablets,
mm,
and, yeah, from Akkadian and Assyrian myths, and, of course, biblical texts too. So he was just pulling from a vast amount of, like, early Mesopotamia and Sumerian texts mostly, which is, like, our original origins, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you his story now. I'm gonna tell you what he put together to the best of my ability. Uh,
Mhm.
okay, so there is a planet called Nibiru, also in modern day known as Planet X, that is a part of our solar system, and it circles the sun in a unique form that's more like an oval than a circle. So it comes really, really close to the sun, and then it goes really, really far into the depths of outer space. Now, because it circles in this weird formation, it takes 3,600 Earth years to make a full rotation around the sun. So when it's at its furthest point away from the sun, it's very cold, okay? And when it's close to the sun, it's very warm. Now, what keeps the planet viable when it's really far away from the sun is that it's volcanic, and so it produces its own heat, and in order to trap that heat on the planet, they rely on their ozone layer as a greenhouse effect. So they need to make sure that that bubble around them is firm and holding the heat in. Now, this is kind of where we start to get into why they come to Earth. But before so okay, hold on. I gotta separate some things. Okay. So I'll just finish off that train of thought and then I'll come back to how Earth was first formed. So they're cold. They need to keep the heat in. They discover if they put gold particles into the atmosphere, it reflects the heat back down. They stay warm and cozy. Everything is good. Now, long, 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 long before any of this, um, there was another but before Earth, okay? Before Earth was created, there was a planet called Tiamat in our solar system, as well as Nibiru. So Nibiru and Tiamat both existed in our solar system, but Earth did not. So, and this is where the nickname the planet of the crossing comes in. So, Tiamat is doing her thing, and she's described in the Enuma Elish as like a watery body, a primordial body of water. And so she's divided into two waters. She's divided into salty water and to fresh water. Now, at some point in time, this is probably millions of years ago, Nibiru's moon, one of Nibiru's moon, when they came into contact with Tiamat. And because Nibiru was moving at, I guess, a faster pace, its moon crashed into Tiamat and exploded her. So the planet exploded into what we now know as the asteroid belt,
Mm,
as well as Earth. So a large chunk of her became Earth, another chunk of her became Earth's moon, and a great majority of her became the asteroid belt. And then they also say that parts of her floated out into deep outer space, never to be seen again. Now, so this is where we get this like division of the waters. And in Zacharias Sitchin's work, he describes that the observers on Nibiru when this happened observed what they called golden veins within the planet upon its explosion. So they saw these golden veins, and recognized that this planet was made there was a ton of gold, physical metal gold, on this planet. And then they went out into space for millions of years, presumably, and their ozone was doing all right, their atmosphere was doing all right, they were staying warm, and then they got a leak, okay? And then they were like, "Oh, remember when?" "Remember when that planet exploded and there was all that gold? What
Mhm.
if we go back," because they need the gold now, right? What if we go back and harvest the gold, and then bring it back to Nibiru and everything remains hunky dory and all is good and wise? So now the leader of the planet at this time was named Anu. Now, this is where, we get kingship from, is because we've followed their, kingship ways of living, structure, hierarchy. And, so the ruler of Nibiru at the time, his name is Anu. Now he has multiple wives, and he has multiple children with multiple wives. Now, the order of succession is based on blood, not necessarily birth order.
Mm.
So, one of Anu's wives is his sister. So whatever offspring they have has higher blood lineage to the royal throne than any of the other wives that he has children with. So his firstborn is Enki, okay?
Mm.
So his firstborn son is Enki, and then his second-born son with his sister is Enlil,
Mm.
okay? So they originally are like, "We're gonna send Enki, to check out this spaceship stuff," and Enki's like, well, he's needed on Nibiru at the time because he is a scientist, he's much smarter, I would say,
Mhm.
is described as his brain is much wiser. And then his brother Enlil is more of a warrior, okay? And so they're like, let's send Enlil, the second born. So they send Enlil to Earth on this great space mission, and lots of things go wrong. It takes thousands of years to get this right. The asteroid belt is this big problem. Blah 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 blah. I'm just gonna fast forward through all of that because we'll be here forever. But anyway, lots goes wrong, and then they finally perfect the mission, getting past the asteroid belt, and they have to land on Mars. That's the closest planet that they can get to Earth. And so they develop what they call a way station on Mars, where they can check out Earth and then go back because Mars is much more stable at that time,
Mm.
of a planet and its atmosphere. So once they figure out that they um sorry, I think I have this backwards. No. Yeah, no, I'm right. Okay, sorry. I'm just, like, second guessing myself. Okay, so now what they do is they go to Earth, they figure out, "Yes, there's gold here. Yes, we can mine it. Now we need physical labor."
Mm.
So, they go back to Nibiru and they sell the story of the Great West. We've heard this story.
Yes, we have.
We will come and we will conquer this land. And while where we are living right now is, not so great and not so well, you will come to the great wide open West and you will plant your roots and you will start your family and you will be free and everything will be great and hunky dory, but you'll have to work. Okay. So they convince a group of working force from Nibiru, of working force Anunnaki from Nibiru, to volunteer and come, on this mission to create a better life. So the working force come and oh my goodness, they were lied to. It's not a better life. They're actually just volunteering themselves as slaves and are putting in ridiculous amounts of back-breaking labor. So they eventually revolt. Okay.
Mm.
And so they say, we want to go home. We're not here to mine the gold anymore. A big battle ensues. They win. Enki and Enlil, um, what is it called? Wave the white flag and say,
Yeah,
sure,
sure.
surrender. Thank you.
Yeah.
Surrender and say, sure, you can go home. But we still need to get the gold because even
Mm,
if you go home, we still need to get the gold in the atmosphere to keep it warm, right?
mhm,
To keep it hospitable. So, Enki says, well, he's the geneticist, he's the scientist. He says, well, and so they have two bases on Earth, okay? They have a
mhm,
base in Africa, South Africa, and then they
mhm,
have a base in what's modern day Iraq, so Mesopotamia.
mhm. Okay.
Okay, so so Enlil is in what's now called Iraq, and Enki is in South Africa. And so Enki says, "Hey, there's these like hominid creatures here." He's talking about monkeys. Okay, he's talking about apes.
Mhm,
Um, and I'm a geneticist, and they have thumbs, and they sometimes walk upright and sometimes on all fours, but they're similar to us. Now, physically, the Anunnaki are very, very tall. They're described as giants, okay? So they're like upwards of 8 feet. Sometimes some places have them recorded all the way up to 20 feet tall.
mm. Wow.
Um, Now, so they say, what if we genetically modify our genetics with and combine them with the hominids on Earth? Because if we combine them with the hominids on Earth, then they're already biologically capable of living
Mhm,
in this atmosphere and this pressure and all of that. And so there's this big debate amongst the council of gods, which is where we get into Genesis. Okay.
mm.
And specifically in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, I'm reading from the New King James Version. Um, then God said, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness." Okay?
Hour.
Our, plural, not singular, which,
Mm,
so much debate over this.
of
Um,
course.
but I mean, it's written there
Yeah.
as a plural, and in the ancient stories, it's also recorded that it's a council, multiple gods,
Mhm,
okay?
mhm,
Refer to
mhm,
themselves as gods. So a big debate ensues. They are like, initially Enlil, the warrior god, is like, I don't know. I don't think this is a good idea. I think that there could be a lot of repercussions to this. Um, and Enki's like excited because he's like, oh my gosh, a project that like I could make a being, I could make a real being. And so eventually they decide, okay, let's go for it. Even though this is against the laws of creation. Okay. So they know that what they're doing is wrong, but they go
mhm.
forth and they do it anyway. And so they create what's called the Adamu. Okay, sounds like Adam.
Yes, it does.
It's spelt almost the same way, except there's a U on the end. Um, and Enki is not alone in this creation. So the other Anunnaki being that helps Enki create the Adamu, her name, female, is Ninhursag. Okay,
Mm,
sometimes Ninhursaga. Um, so it's between female and male that create this
mm,
Adamu. Now, they create the Adamu, but it's not that easy. They make a lot of mistakes, and I have a feeling this might overlap with some of the Atlantean stuff. Um, and
like you
anyway, so
guys?
yeah, with hybrid creatures, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So they make a lot of mistakes and they create a lot of monsters, and beings that live in pain and whatnot, and it takes them a long time to perfect this
Mhm.
Adamu. And so they create the Adamu, and then they put him, Adam, they put him in a garden. Okay,
Huh. Funny that.
weird. But it's more Sitchin describes it more of, like a zoo, okay? Like
Oh,
a
wow.
Yeah, like a contained area in which the Adamu has everything he needs. He has vegetation. He has all of his basic needs. Um, and he's naked. Okay.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
then what they do to create the working force that they need after they create the initial Adamu is they clone him. Okay.
Ah.
Yeah, so they just replicate the same one over and over and over again that goes out and works. Now what they find is this works for so long, but the process of cloning is actually incredibly difficult, and uses a lot of resources, and they actually need, in order to do this, surrogate Anunnaki females. Okay?
That sounds
So yeah, and, like, he gets into all of the gestation stuff and, like, how the gestation is actually 10 months, not 9, because of the which is why another reason, parallels with modern day and stuff is
mhm.
that babies are actually born too big because of our mixed genetics, that we're not actually supposed to be as big as we are, um, and that's why babies are born too big, and they're born preterm at 9 months.
Oh.
Um, yeah. So anyway, I digress. So the Anunnaki females kind of get tired of, constantly being pregnant, and they don't want to do it anymore. So they're like, okay. And they also notice that the Adamu is sad. Like he's like, and it's not living very long, right? They're dying pretty quickly, and
Yeah.
so they're like, we need to make this better so that there's more longevity in what we're doing and we are requiring less resources to make our slaves. So another great debate ensues over giving the Adamu a female and giving them the ability to reproduce. Because if they give them the ability to reproduce, they don't have to make slaves anymore. The
Sure.
slaves will make them themselves, right? So anyway, we can figure out that that goes forward, and,
Mm.
the Adamu is given a female, okay? And so now she's placed in the original Adamu, she's placed in this zoo, Garden of
Mm.
Eden, okay?
Mhm.
With the original, okay?
Mm.
And, now what happens here, um, is that Enki has a change of heart. I don't know if it's a change of heart, but, like, more, like, fully true to himself. But what
Mhm.
happens is there's this constant battle between Enki and Enlil, the brothers,
Mhm.
because, um, Enki Enlil is given succession of the earth. He's given dominion over the earth, Enlil is, and, Enki is so jealous of this. Enki is like, I'm the firstborn. I should have this, but Enlil's the blood lineage, the
Course. Yeah.
sister and the dad. And so Enki's like, ugh. There's this like constant battle between the two of them fighting over who has dominion over the earth. When
Mhm.
ultimately the ruling ship comes down and it's Enlil that has it. And so Enki kind of is a bit of a rebel, I think, by nature, and so, not only that is he's made this, like, super amazing thing. He's made a human being. He's made multiple human beings, and so he falls into this, like, sense of pride over his creation, and he loves it. Like, he truly, with all emotion, loves what he's made, and so he's, like, revolting now against his brother, Enlil, who Enlil is like, iron fist. Like, don't let them know anything, don't give them anything, keep it as minimum as possible, because Enlil's also in this, like, um, frame of mind, I believe, of, like, what we've done is wrong, so we have to really, really control it and
Mhm.
limit its growth, and Enki's like, "Well, we're here now. Let's see what happens."
Yep.
So, um, Enlil now, the, correlation with Enlil and the God of the Old Testament is, lots of people will correlate Enlil to Yahweh. They're both in demeanor, war gods. They
Mm,
both rule with an iron fist. They're unforgiving, and they see themselves as the supreme leader, okay? Now, um, Enki is like, "You know what? Sorry, mom. Fuck yeah. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna just stir some shit up." So he goes in to so there's this debate over like, let's make them happier by giving them knowledge, right? And Enlil's like, absolutely not. They cannot have knowledge. If they know too much, they'll be harder to control, right? And Enki's like, but they'll be happier. And if they're happier, they'll live longer and we'll have better slaves, right?
mhm,
And so Anki sneaks in to this enclosure and says, "Psst, psst, come over here. I know that I know that my brother has told you not to eat from the tree of knowledge, but if you do, you will be granted wisdom. You will know where you've come from.
mm,
You will know where you're going." And so we have the story of in Genesis where Eve goes and eats from the fruit of knowledge.
mhm,
Um, and then all of a sudden is wise and understands what's going on. And so she's like, "I'm naked." And the Adamu is like, "Oh, what's going on? We're all naked." And then Enlil comes into the scene and is like, "Where are you? Where are you? I cannot find you." And it's like, if you're looking at it from the biblical point of view and he's like this all-knowing God, he shouldn't be asking, "Hello, hello, hello, where are you? I can't find you." He should know where they are.
correct.
Um, yeah. So anyway, he finds them and then is like realizes that they've eaten from the tree of knowledge. They know what's up and then is now immediately threatened and is like, "Oh my
Mm,
goodness, remember when the Ajiji or the working class Anunnaki revolted because they became wise to what we were doing.
mhm,
We cannot afford another revolt. So we must banish them. They can't see or know what's going on here in this
mm,
enclosure. They can't know what's happening. So he exiles them, which is interesting. He doesn't destroy them, but he exiles them. So
yes, that
maybe
is
there's a little
interesting.
yeah, maybe there's a little bit of forgiveness in the old fart's heart.
Well, and
Um,
it's his creation, right? So why would he destroy the one thing that brought him, the most joy and
well,
power?
I mean, it was his brother's
Well,
creation.
his
It was
brother's creation, but still, like,
yeah,
you know, look what it
but
did for
he needed them. Yeah.
he needed them,
So
correct,
he
yeah.
he needed them. Anyway, so he's like, "You know what? We'll just go forward with what we have with the ones that don't know yet. So we'll
Mhm,
banish the ones that are wise so that their knowledge doesn't get out." Now, this is where things get interesting, if they're not
mm,
already, okay? So, they go out and they have babies, and they multiply, okay? And they're out fending for themselves and making life work with what they have. Now, what happens is some of the Ajiji didn't leave, okay? They're like, "We're no longer slaves, but we got to stay and we got to, like, chill out and hang out and, like, try to, like, enjoy life here on Earth without mining the gold anymore because we have the humans to do that now." So, what happens is that now that some of the humans have left the enclosure and are now breeding, they're creating populations.
mhm.
And the Ajiji are under strict rule that they are not allowed to interbreed with the humans.
Ah.
However, men be men. Um, uh, boys
Maybe
be
let
boys. Boys get desires. Boys do bad things with those desires, right? And so this is the story of the Nephilim and the fallen angels in the Bible where this comes up.
Aha.
Yes. So, in what, Genesis 6:4. Here, I'll read it to you.
Mhm.
It's quite interesting. Let me flip the old papyrus here.
I know, while you look for that, the word papyrus is actually where we get the word paper from. The
Yes,
Egyptian word papyrus gave us the word paper. Thank you.
Egyptian. Look at it. Here we go. Full circle. Okay, so in Genesis 6 chapter Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, I have in my notes here. It says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old,
Mm,
men of renown." So, the mighty men who were of old, so implying
mhm,
that there was a time before, right?
mm,
Um, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, "I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them." Okay. And then it goes
mm,
into talk about Noah. So, what we've established here in this part of the story is that God felt remorse because what
mhm,
happened was the Anunnaki bred with the humans, and the offspring of those were said to be these wicked, evil beings that had no sense of control or remorse, or really empathy at all. And so they were doing horrific things. And so, um, Enlil's processing of how to handle this was to flood the earth. Okay. This is,
Wow.
"Let us flood it. W Flood it all." So they must have been pretty bad, okay, and not being able to control them. And so he's like, "Flood it, let's start over." Okay? So Enki is like, "No! My creations, my babies, my project. I don't do it. I love them." So Enki goes and in um, Zecharia Sitchin's work, he goes to a man named Ziusudra, okay? And this is in parallel to the Noah figure in the Bible. Now, he goes to Ziusudra, which is believed to be one of his offspring, one of his sons. And so he's half man, half god. And so he goes to Ziusudra and he says, "A flood is coming. This is what's going to happen. You need to prepare." And Enki, being the geneticist that he is, says, "Bring cryovac chambers on your ark." Okay, it's an ark. It's not a boat. It might be a boat, but it's described as an ark. So it could
Correct.
also be a spaceship.
Correct.
Um, could be a boat, could be a spaceship. It's an arc, whichever way you wanna go about it, but he tells Ziusudra, AKA Noah, that, "Look, there's gonna be a flood, and we need to preserve what we've created. So, create a cryovac chamber and put all of the seeds, male and female, to produce the embryos that we need to recreate life on planet once the flood subsides." So, Ziusudra builds the ark. Noah builds the ark, and we have that parallel there in that story as
Wow.
well. Yeah, and what happens is it's because of these interbreeding. That's the reason, right?
Mhm,
That's the reason why the flood happens, which is why I'm, like, interested to see, the parallels with the Atlantean stuff as well as the Egyptian stuff because there's
mhm.
a flood story in both of that
Got it.
narrative too. Yes. And what was going on before the flood happened, some bad things, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I could keep going, but yeah, after the flood happens, And then post-flood, they reestablish life again, civilization returns, Enki's son Marduk comes into play here. Then the Tower of Babel comes in this story, and, so once civilization restarts, like the biblical Tower of Babel is like the people are all in unison here, which is so beautiful. They come together, they're all speaking the same language. They build a ladder to the skies because they're trying to meet their quote unquote gods, alien on their
Yep,
spaceships, to
like
see
a
what's
lit
going on. Yeah, they wanna have a better understanding, better perspective, and then Enlil's like, "Fuck. No, no. Stop it. Stop trying to find out more."
Mhm.
And then he comes in and, divides the people, confuses their language, which is what we call babble, right? Babble,
Of
babble,
course.
like, when a baby's babbling and they don't make any sense.
Yep.
Confuses the language, separates the people, creates division. Unity equals power, division equals control. And so, yeah, that's kind of
Wow.
to sum it all up.
That was great. Good job.
Th
I'm
Thank you.
impressed. That was really cool. Like, there was a lot of things coming to mind. And another thing that popped into my mind as you were speaking about, basically that the relationship of the brothers, right? Like Enki and Enlil. And this is a creation story we're not covering currently, but it makes me think of like the jealousy between the brothers makes me think of Loki and Thor in the Nordic
Mhm.
teachings, right? Where they were both sons of Odin. Um, one was it was sent to be or tasked with being ruler, crowned. Like I don't know how to say this. Um, Loki
Appointed?
pissed off, and Loki was the trickster god, right? So it's kinda interesting to see again in another creation story this, like, parallel of these, like, jealous brothers. Um,
Mhm.
so that's kinda interesting to me. Um, the other thing when you were talking about cloning, and this is like a pop culture reference, so for those who love a good old Rick and Morty,
Oh, I love
viewing,
that. Yeah.
love it. Um, Adult cartoon, for those who don't know, highly recommend, check it out.
10
When
out
you
of
were
10.
talking about the cloning, it made me think of the Meeseeks episode. Do you know that episode or those
Remind
characters?
me.
So basically, Rick had created a device that you pressed a button, and then this being popped out that's like, "I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me," and then you
Oh,
could
yeah,
get
yeah.
this being to do something for you, and then when it had completed its task that you asked it to do, it would poof disappear because its job and its mission was done. Well,
Yeah,
as you can imagine, things went wrong because the button kept getting pressed and the Meeseeks kept getting asked to do things, but then the things that they were being asked to do were too complicated because they were simple, or they weren't completing their tasks, and the world kept getting filled with all these Meeseeks, and then
yeah.
chaos ensued. Right, so it's kind of interesting that literally is the story of what you just described, but in a pop culture reference. It's also hilarious, like, the way the voice of the Meeseeks to me is
I
very kind
remember that episode, it was pretty good.
it's so funny. It's, like, in the first or second season or something, but,
Yeah.
other thing that comes up that I find really fascinating, um, is the idea of gold, right? Like, the fact that they were seeking this substance that if we look right now in the world where wars are happening and where resources are being raped, literally, and taken from the people, it's exactly where Enki and Enlil were, making their mark in their early days on planet Earth. So I find that interesting. But also, the Egyptians were very connected to, and I would call them protectors of gold. They were
Mhm.
gold keepers, and they used gold in alchemy to become more quantum. So it's really, really cool. You can work with gold as a tool to basically become even more of an incredible piece of technology. So,
Mhm.
there's a reason why the Egyptians were connected to the sun, why they were working with the sun as not only almost like a battery that could charge us as the technology, but how they worked with gold and how they protected gold. And still to this day, are I would call them like keepers of gold, like that they protect it. So
Mhm.
something just kind of interesting. There was so much in there, Mel. Like, thank you so much for telling that story in the engaging way that you did. Um, and just and it even makes me think of what we talked about in the last episode with the humanimals, right? With the Atlantean story. And it was this like, oh, we messed up. I almost dropped the F bomb, but I changed it for you, mom. And we have to come and we have to fix what we've messed up, right? Like that's why
Totally.
and tasked us with creating the hospitals in Egypt or these places in Egypt where we could heal these beings that had, you know, basically been made to suffer. And we hear that even in the Anunnaki creation story, like they created these beings that were made to suffer and beings that now are still suffering, right? We look at humanity, like we're still repeating the same structures, hierarchy, like the architecture of all of that is the same, right? And it's just in a different
Totally.
form in our modern world. So
And it's
hopefully,
all about gold.
yeah, it's all about gold or some resource that they feel will make them richer or will help them survive, And
Mhm.
it's so nice because I've been seeing this really beautiful video, this reel that's been floating around, and it just keeps saying there is no scarcity. There is enough water on this planet. There is enough oil. There is enough gold. There's enough this. Like we are telling the people that there is scarcity, but there is no scarcity. It is what you
That's
truly
right.
believe, right? So that's my spiel for today. Thank you.
You're just
That was
getting
so great.
started.
Yeah, we're just getting started. So now the Egyptian creation story. Are you
Yes, I'm
ready?
so excited. I'm so ready. Like,
Cool.
tell me everything, Steph.
Yeah.
Tell
Oh,
me.
my pleasure.
Where
So
does it start?
similar to what we were discussing before, there isn't a single version because based on to the region of Egypt, like we have each kind of center of Egypt, and I would say that the central city or like the capital would change depending on the dynasty and the ruler that was in charge. So a lot of the stories will shift slightly based on the region that they're coming from. Also, um, each region would have a neter or a god or goddess. We call them gods and goddesses. The word that they used is actually neter, Neter, or netzer, Netser in English spelling. Um, I took this really beautiful course that was basically an Egyptian mystery school. We did have an Egyptian teacher. And I got to learn a little bit about the hieroglyphic language or the ancient Egyptian language, I should say. The word hieroglyph comes from the Greek. So when the Greeks started to explore, a lot of the words, even the word Egypt comes from Egypto, which is a Greek word. So
Mm,
Egypt, I should call it Kem. Kem was actually what they referred
right.
to their land as. Um, excuse me, let me just clear my throat so I can get ready. So basically, in the beginning, there was only chaos or noon, as they call it. So Nun. And this was this dark, infinite ocean of chaos. So these primordial waters, again, we come back to this idea of beginning with water. There
Water.
was no
Mhm.
sky, but there was just potential. And from this void, the first act of creation begins. So the first god, or I'm going to say Netzer or Neter, appears, and this is Noon, or sorry, it comes from Noon, the primordial waters, and this mound rises, like land rising from a flood. So again, we have this reference to the flood or this time before, and on it appears the creator god Amun. And in Heliopolis or some of the other locations, they call him Ra or Ra Atum or Anum. Amun, excuse me. So Amun creates himself, symbolizing self awareness. So now we're kind of getting the idea of consciousness, right? Showing up from the chaos. And so this act of self creation really establishes also the pattern that the Egyptians saw daily, which was the sun rising and setting each day. So each dawn, when the sun, which we later identify or call Ra, it creates itself, or it's reborn each day by rising. So we have this idea of a cycle now showing up. Then we have the first creation. So these are like the children are starting to be born. So the first child that is born or is Shu, which represents air. And then we have Tefnut, which represents moisture. She represents moisture, excuse me. And so this is the first representation now that we have of separation and balance, right? So now we kind of have the idea of like masculine and feminine. I won't put that label on it yet, but the idea of these two things that we are creating in balance. Then the world is born. So Shu and Tefnut give birth to Geb, which represents earth, and Nut, which represents sky. Originally, Geb and Nut are actually born interlocked and together as one being, but they're separated by Shu. And this now we realize we have a place for life to exist. So we actually have a location. So the air that we actually breathe is literally Shu holding the sky apart from the earth. I just think that's such a
Okay.
beautiful image if you picture that. And if you see, when you see the depictions of these on the temple walls, it's exactly as I'm describing it. So, like, Newt
Mm.
is when we see a visualization of her, she's this very tall, long woman who's standing over the world, like, as a bridge almost, and she's blue and covered in stars. So it's like it's
Cool.
just so beautiful. Um, and then with that separation, we now have, the ordered cosmos or Ma'at. And Ma'at is the goddess of, like, justice and balance, basically. So once we have these beings, we have a couple more that are going to join that are going to create something called the Ennead. So the Ennead are the nine kind of original creator deities. So the Ennead is created as the next Neters are born. So something important to note is that they were believed to walk the earth, and I will give a little bit of proof of that later, where that's written.
This is
Um,
like the council.
yeah, yeah, kind of, yeah. And then I can see how it relates to the Atlantean story, and I'll get there shortly.
Have you heard the Council of 9 too? Okay, keep
Yes.
going.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're not wrong. So from Geb and Nut come the next generation of Neters, who are Osiris, so Osiris, Isis or Isis, Set, and Nephthys. So these nine Neters now form the divine family that basically governs existence. And if you see or visualize these beings, most of them are hybrid beings. So if we look at Isis, Isis was an avian, was a blue avian. This is a being with wings, right?
Mhm.
I'll get into that later, but going back to now this idea of like these animal hybrid beings,
Mhm.
um,
Oh, yeah.
right? So the humanimals that we talked about
Mhm.
in the Atlantean story, which again in Egypt were not considered ugly. They were revered as gods or as nature.
Mhm.
And I should note, actually, in some of my studies of the original divine language of Egypt, um, the uh, the word for totally lost my train of thought. It's gone, guys. It's coming back, but it's not right now. I outside and I was like, wow, that's loud. Is the microphone picking it up? And then I forgot what I was talking about. But I'll get it's fine. ISIS. What was I talking about? ISIS and then the
Yeah, you
word
were the words, the bird, birds, the word.
yeah, this
Um,
it's okay. Doesn't matter. I'll keep going.
yeah, we were talking about the, uh, hybridization of the
Yeah.
animal and
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
that they weren't seen as uh bad or wrong or because they were seen as the gods and goddesses of that time. I know what I was going to say. The word neater actually is where the word nature is derived from in the English language. So we see them or we've been taught that these were gods and goddesses, but if you look at the creation story, they're actually elements. They are actually representations of nature.
Oh,
Right? So they weren't
right.
just yes, they were divine, but they were literally the representation of these forms of nature that we have on planet Earth. So,
That makes
kind
sense.
of a cool thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because it's, like, describing, like, the one goddess as, like, the sky and one as the waters, and it's, like,
exactly.
they're not these, like, human form beings that are
Yes.
the gods, it's, like, just actually the wholeness of what they are.
Yes, and so there's that understanding that the Egyptians always had that we are not separate from what is nature, that we are not
Ooh,
separate from source. They understood
right.
it through nature, but we'll get into later, we've talked about, Akhenaten and when he brought back the actual idea that there was a one divine source that we all came from and we came from oneness, but it was
Mhm.
misunderstood when he tried to teach this, so we'll get there. But I'm gonna bring forward, kind of a cool term that comes up quite a bit, and you might have heard it, Zep-Tepi. So this is
Yes.
this is actually means the first time or the first occasion in ancient Egyptian. And so this actually refers to and this is a Graham Hancock belief as well. There's another amazing journalist and I'm forgetting his name. I'll get the name and I can put it in the show notes. But there is a belief of the age of the Egyptian civilization and the pyramids, and that it is much older than what we've originally been told. Because we
I
were
think I know
talking
who you're talking about.
so what our my teacher, Mohammed Ibrahim, you can check him out actually. He wrote a book, and I will find the title of the book that I cannot remember off the top of my head. But he is writing about our timeline, like humanity's timeline, and then why each is so incredibly important in determining this. That he believes that the pyramids and that the early Egyptian civilization existed in 10,500 BC or earlier, so much earlier than what, current Egyptologists believe. So Zep-Tepi. So this is the belief, that there was a mythical golden age, and I don't want to say mythical, that there was a golden age at the beginning of the world when the gods lived and walked the earth, who I would call the Ennead. So this for me was Atlantis. And it lines up in my opinion. The
Yeah.
Egyptian texts, specifically royal inscriptions, so the pyramid texts, the later period temple reliefs, and consistently state that the gods of Zep-Tepi lived in Egypt as actual kings before giving the throne to semi-divine and then fully human dynasties. So as we devolved, right, um, we handed Egypt down, and we can see what happened, right? But these beings actually existed, and for me, these were the humanimals that were here to and humanity and the beings that were around, I think they mistook them later as gods, right? But really they were the neeters, excuse me. And if we're going back even further to the Atlantean creation story, these were the humanimals that were trying to find their way back to oneness, or the children of the law of one.
So they survived the flood.
They survived the flood. Not everybody did, but many of them did, and Egypt was a rebuild. Remember we talked about that in, like, our way earlier episodes when I was a guest on this podcast, that Egypt was the attempt to, yes, to regain our connection to source, but also to rebuild this galactic civilization that we once had on this planet where we were advanced beings called Atlantis.
Yeah.
So I will continue because I have more proof as to where it's written. So, for example, many of us are aware of the Turin Kings list, and it claims the reign of tens of thousands of years for gods and demigods before Menes, and this was written in 3100 BCE. So, also to kind of add some more proof to that, the Edfu temple, or the Temple of Edfu, which we spoke about in that other episode, contains texts describing how Horus and his followers, called the Shemsu Hor, or followers of Horus, ruled during or immediately after Zep-Tepi. So
Mm.
the before time, when the beings came, Zep-Tepi, um, handed down the teachings to the followers of Horus. And in the Egyptian teachings, you would have been asked. So there were the two brothers, Horus and Set. Horus was the son of Isis, and as well as Set, if I'm not wrong. And they were another example of two warring brothers. So two brothers that became jealous of one another. more so Set. Horus was so thinking of the idea of good and evil, right? So you would have been asked in back in the day, are you a brother, or are you a man of Horus, or are you a man of Set? And a man of Horus was someone that walked in integrity and was a good person. They knew their connection to source and oneness. Whereas if you were a man of Set, you were a little bit more of a chaotic being. And they even connected color to this. Like Horus very much connected to the color blue. Set was red or black.
Mm.
So really interesting, like again, this dichotomy of this, like the good and evil that we see even in the creation story. Um, and there's even talk as well, and in my own kind of reading, that the followers of Horus actually ended up bringing the teachings down, and some of those people became the Essene brothers, right? So this
Of
goes
Set?
far down. Sorry?
Set's lineage? Sorry,
No,
Set?
Horus. Horus.
Horus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So what I love as well is the Egyptian civilization, like this idea of Zeptepi. We have an idea now, or a theme of remembrance happening. So again, coming back to what you and I talk about all the time on this podcast, are we just remembering what we've forgotten so long ago? And that's what
Mhm.
the whole concept of Zeptepi, or the before time, shows us that we are here to remember. It's a remembrance. It's not a new thing that we need to learn. And the ancient
And
Egyptians,
it's like what Enki planted in the Adamu with the tree of
yes,
knowledge, is like that
exactly,
remembering.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, to summarize the whole story, we go from order into chaos. We find divine balance in creation of the elements. Creation now has consciousness, thought and intention shape reality, which is the Hermetic teachings,
Yeah.
which we know comes from Thoth, who we know was an Egyptian Neteru. Sorry, not
Yeah.
Neteru, Neter. Yeah, I guess they're the Neteru as well. That's the plural word for it. And then we have cyclical renewal as the sun, or Ra, is reborn each day. So that's basically the creation story. And what I love too about the ancient Egyptians is that they believe that you could create energy into matter. Like they just knew this. And this was part of
Mhm.
their teachings from the beginning. And this is something really cool I wanted to share, and that I learned about more recently, is their statues, and why the statues are so important. Um, they believed in God making. So again, if we're looking at the Neteru as a version of gods, or these beings of nature on planet Earth at this time, um, to make a god does not by any means refer to what something like Enki and Enlil were trying to do, where they were trying to play creator or play gods. It
Yeah.
literally is the concept of bringing God into the physical vessel. So another overlap,
Mm.
that we're here to be versions of what the gods or the Neteru taught us, and so we can walk that and carry that on planet Earth. So this was the act of bringing God into this world, and this is why the statues are so important, and why they
Through
were.
consciousness.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so many people speak about, and I did visit this temple, and this particular statue, super famous, is the statue of Sekhmet, that everybody knows. She's in the dark, there's a light shining on her from above, and she's the lion-headed goddess, the goddess of excuse me. I don't want to say just war. That's a very like kind of blanket way of describing her. But when you call Sekhmet in to support you, shit's going to move fast and it's going to be fiery. That's all I'm saying.
Mm.
So when you visit this statue, a lot of the times people have very mystical experiences, and it's because this statue has not been moved. So it has stayed exactly where it was shamanically activated since ancient times. That's why it is
Right.
still alive, why it is still carrying, and statue has been prayed upon. I don't wanna say worshipped, but connected with, and truly is the essence of what this goddess represents, and still does, because the statue has not been moved, because it is connected also to the land that it was blessed on and that it was activated on. So just kind of
Yeah, which is just like this kinda goes back to Reiki too, is like that life force energy is like it's just existing in the ethers, it's existing in the physical as well, and you need to connect it together, the ether
absolutely,
and the physical. And so, like, that's
absolutely.
really cool that that was connected, and it's probably a significant ley line, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely. And, yeah, so I find that so fascinating. The other thing that I wanted to share about was the Ankh, because we talked about that
Oh,
the other
yes.
day, and the Ankh shows up quite a bit. Yes, we know it's an Egyptian symbol, but I ended up taking a picture of a book of the Gnostic, just it's a kind of a compilation of some of the Gnostic Gospels, and on the front of the book is an Ankh. And it made me really excited, and now I'm just gonna share, like, what it represents in the Egyptian teachings, and this from my Egyptian teacher as well, which I'm really grateful for. I personally wanted to learn these things from an Egyptian who was connected to the land and who was teaching from Egypt online, which was so beautiful. So he was on the
Yeah.
land telling us the info. So basically, we know the Ankh very much looks similar to the cross. The Christians did take the Ankh and alter it. So the Ankh is the original, and it represents life. And the way it does is the bottom kind of vertical staff represents or is connected to the underground. The intersecting line in the center, or the that intersects the post, represents Earth, and the loop at the top represents going to the sky and coming back. So it
It's like
first
a
of
full
all,
circuit.
exactly, a circuit. So it doesn't end, right? And that's, I think, what's really important. If we look at the traditional cross, or the one that we have now, it's a literal intersection, and when you cross yourself, it's like you touch your third eye, you touch your heart, and then you cancel it, like crossing over your left shoulder and your right shoulder. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting
Mhm.
how that symbol is so similar but has shifted so drastically in what it represents. Um, and what I love is the symbol contains movement and is the direct path that we consistently take when in communion with source, and also like a map that we can use to remember how we bring energy into matter,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's the Ankh teachings, and it that's
What's cool about the Ankh is and the cross is,
mhm.
like, they called the Anunnaki, I should say. The Anunnaki called Tiamat the planet of the crossing.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
And so, like, you get this imagery of and, like, for them, the planet of the crossing was destruction. And so you get this image of a cross, not just in Christianity and Catholicism, but, like, you get, like, the cross where it's more of like an X or a plus sign,
Yes,
where the one isn't as long, they're both equal in height
equal.
and length. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so you'll see that imagery across many,
yeah,
many different
yeah.
organizations. The other thing and we're talking about, like, the cross,
Isn't that
is
the chemical symbol for Earth too?
well, I was just gonna I love you.
Sorry.
No, you're so like, um the, medical staff with the serpent
Yes,
running up around it
yes.
because the serpent represents
Yes.
Enki. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so the serpent represents Enki, and Enki is up the staff, as the geneticist, the medical.
oh my god.
And so it's like these symbols have come down from, like, ancient of ancient times. They've been
Oh,
adapted and changed slightly, but really they've been kept. Um, and I think that gives us evidence that these ancient creator beings are still walking amongst us.
yes. It even makes me think of the symbol of the 4 directions too, like, think of, like, our indigenous teachings,
And the
northeast,
swastika.
southwest, and the swastika too, which is actually a Tibetan symbol that means something not what how it was reframed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Austrian painter pulled the swastika from that ancient Tibetan school of thought
Wow.
because it does represent harmony and balance within the natural order.
Course, so then reverse it, and then it becomes the opposite.
Everything's inverted. We live in a
Yeah,
very inverted world.
I was looking for, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
This blew my mind. I didn't realize the caduceus, which you were describing with the snake and the
Oh, that's what
which
that's called, yeah.
uh, which represents, and we see that in Hermes' hand too, though, right?
Yes, because so Hermes Trismegistus was the Greek, right? And so he pulls his wisdom knowledge from Thoth, the Egyptian,
Yes.
right? Which crosses over into Atlantean, right? Because
Yes.
he's
Yeah.
the bringer from the times of old, the men of
Yes.
renown, as the Bible describes them.
Mhm.
He's Enki is real or not Enki, Thoth is really the bridge between the 2 worlds of old
Yes.
and modern day. He's the one that survived the knowledge, the wisdom, and then
Absolutely.
brought it to the Egyptian teachings, which then brought it to Greece with Hermes
Mhm.
Trismegistus, which also brought it to the Essenes, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's like it's really this preservation of knowledge that's happened over time and time again throughout literally thousands, hundreds of thousands, like the Anunnaki first came to Earth 450,000 years ago. That's
Wow.
when they're recorded to first come. And, so hundreds of thousands of years, we have been trying so hard to come into our wisdom, to come into our gnosis,
Yes.
um, so that we can evolve as a human race. And I think that, we got really close in the times of Atlantis.
We
I
did.
think that we were highly evolved, and for whatever reason, which I'm still yet to discover. And so if you're listening and you know the reason, um, the Atlanteans were given grace and allowance and space and time to evolve
Mm.
into greater knowledgeable beings.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering why they were allowed to do that if they were still under the iron fist of Enlil or Yahweh or Zeus,
Mm.
whatever you wanna bring in. Um, or yeah, and so it's just like it's just interesting that they were allowed to evolve to the heights that they were, to the point where it's my understanding that they evolved so much that they got bored, and then they started making these messed up hybrid creatures and playing gods.
Yeah, and I think, like, you hit on something there. I think it's not just that they got bored, it's how they started to hoard knowledge. Like, it's when they decided
Mm.
that knowledge was not for all, you know? So, for me, when we talk about, like, the slave race, because in Atlantean times, there were classes, you know? And again, I would say this was
Okay.
more so if people, like, there golden age, right? And Atlantis was a galactic civilization. So almost an experiment in the way that like multiple beings from multiple star races came together to create this ultimate experiment, which also was the experiment of living in a fifth dimensional way on a 3D planet. So that was part of it
Mm.
too, was can we make this happen? Can we actually do this? And and then in that golden age, they absolutely did, and it was as time went on where, remember, those new emotions started to be created, and, maybe this was when, the Anunnaki started to be like, they started to play a little bit too much, right? And they started to, let's make these clones, and for those of you who have read Sarah Breskman Cosme's book, The Hypnotic Journey to Atlantis, she's a QHHT practitioner,
Love her.
quantum hypnotherapy, quantum hypnotherapy, something hypnosis technique. There's I don't remember all the
Oh,
words.
are you talking about Dolores Cannon's
So
QHHT?
yeah,
Yeah.
so in those discoveries,
Hypnosis, quantum hypnosis, hypnotherapy technique.
yeah, so something like that. So Sarah, what I love is she did, have a client that she regressed to the end, I'm gonna say the end of Atlantean times, because this was not in the golden age, and she actually, accessed the memories of a Lemurian queen. So it was interesting, and it was unfortunately the chaotic time, but there was a
Mhm.
race of beings that they were experimenting on, and they were, doing this with medical devices, that
Oh,
that
injections.
yeah, injections that we have been experienced in the very recent past, where they were creating hybrid beings using genetics. And so who's to say that that wasn't describing the Anunnaki beings that were doing that work in Atlantean times, right? Like, I don't know, 'cause
Right.
that's not the type of
'Cause you're
Atlantean I was. Like, hell
we
no,
weren't
man.
there.
Um, oh, I was there. I think I was already in Egypt at that point. I think I was like, "Imma go help with the rebuild," because remember too, Atlanteans were telepathic, right? They before we devolved, we knew many of us knew that this was coming, that this flood was coming, that this fall was coming. So I think then many of us were like, "Let's get the F out of here, and we're gonna go start to create this new place," and many of us went to Chem. Some of us went to the Mayan Riviera, and we created I could go
Oh,
on.
Quetzalcoatl, that comes
Yeah,
up.
there you go. So, like, I could go on and think that we're not even thinking of, like, the Nordic teachings, the Greeks. The Greeks were I was taught that the mythology from the Greeks and the Romans is actually they were Atlanteans. It's Atlantean
Yeah.
history. I just
Oh,
wrote it down.
it's the same pantheon, right? So you got all of these different pantheons of gods where you
Yep.
have, like, a council of higher beings,
Mhm.
which automatically separates a ruling class from a working class as soon as there's a pantheon of gods, and then
Mhm.
they describe themselves as the all-knowing, and then, us small-brained minded, intentionally created small-brained and minded people
Yep.
have no choice but to worship them because they do appear to be magicians and, like, out of the ordinary and have access to advanced technology that they don't give us access to, and it all is just a mirror to what is happening today, where it's like we have a pantheon of we do in modern day have a pantheon of gods, and we call them
Yep.
Hollywood.
And
Um,
Hollywood.
like, how many people follow Kim Kardashian, Beyonce Knowles, Kanye West, like, how many people follow those accounts on Instagram or wherever you follow people on socials?
Yep.
It's like these people and then, during all of the, like, 2020 chaos, it's
Yeah.
like these pantheon of gods that we call celebrities go online and they post, "I am support of this politician because this politician is right, and if you don't support this politician, then you're an evil, terrible human being." And so then all of these people who worship these gods in quotes,
Yeah.
then do what their gods tell them to do because we worship them because they have
Yep.
this elite L. By the way, we're speaking about language, L-eat. L
Yep.
is derived from Enlil, is
Ah,
Lil. So anytime well, when Joni and I were looking at names to name our baby boy here oh my god, a couple years ago, ew. Um, I was really looking at, like, a name that was, like, very powerful and from
mhm.
the ancient,
Zeus.
times,
I'm
and
just kidding.
but I was, like, very, like, there cannot be any N or any Lil. Like, there cannot be a derivation of Enlil's name. But yeah, so elite, Leet comes from Enlil because he was the ruler, he was. And you'll see that a lot in, like, Hebrew, texts, Hebrew language is
Ah,
that there's a lot of Lil and N. Anyway, I digress.
that's
But yeah, so, like, in modern days, we are worshiping a pantheon of gods, and we do very much wait for their command and their,
correct.
whatever they want us to do. And then most of us, because we've been genetically modified, you and I haven't, but many of us have been genetically modified by certain injections from very recent past.
Mm,
Um, we are now more programmed to obey even more than than Enki had originally created the genome to,
Yes.
live in us of obedience. Like, we have it in us to obey,
Yep.
and you get into the whole scientific stuff, and someone who's really good to go and, read about his research is Michael Tellinger, because Michael Tellinger, he wrote this book who it is phenomenal. It's called, The Slave Species of the Gods. I think that's what it's called. Um, yeah, The Slave Species and the Gods Who Made Them, I think, yeah, Michael Tellinger. He grew up in South Africa, was, like, very much in with gold, right? Lots of gold, and,
Nice.
what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah, so he breaks down the scientific, narrative of, like, the genome and the genetics and, like,
Mhm.
um, how, scientists in modern day say that we have all this they call it junk DNA, like, it's, like,
Yeah,
DNA that we don't have access to,
yeah.
and it's not junk DNA. It's that,
You
when
activate it.
Enki created us, he had to literally cut off the telomeres to
Mhm.
reaching one another to, talk to each other so that we could be as smart and as wise as our creator, quote unquote, gods. Um, elites. So, anyway, we're literally genetically engineered to obey, and
Yes.
we have within us the genetics, it's coded within us that we can access to make us become knowledgeable, to
Mhm.
reach gnosis. It's just that they're poisoning us so that we don't, because they're like, "Oh no, they're getting too smart. They're all
Yeah,
learning to speak the
sure.
same language." They have apps on their phones that will speak one language and then out the other language to the other person so that they can understand each other now. And, like, here in
Yeah,
Canada, what are they trying to do? Is they're, like, cutting communication off to us by
sensors.
exactly,
Mm,
there's so many articles come up that's like, "Oh, you're not allowed to read that because 'cause you're in Canada,
yeah.
and you're not allowed to read that content."
Yeah,
And
for
I'm
our
like,
listeners
"What's going
outside
on?"
yeah, for our listeners outside of Canada, just so you know, there was a bill that was passed that literally stops us from sharing, news articles on social media. So, I
Mhm.
did an interview about an opera I was singing in on a news channel, a radio channel, and I couldn't even share the article because our government is worried that I'm going to what? Tell the truth? So, and this all
Push the
started
propaganda that they don't
yeah,
want you to push.
this all started like, if you look at the timing of all of these things, there's always a reason. There's always something behind it. So, all I would say, just to kind of wrap this up, is just question things. There's nothing wrong with questioning things, and they're gonna make you think that questioning something makes you a conspiracy theorist or a weirdo or that there's something wrong with you. Why wouldn't we ask questions? Why do we just
Yeah.
trust the guy to say, "Yeah, this medicine is good, take it." What's in it? You can't tell me? Why? You know? So follow that
Yes,
as a level of discernment. If you're not getting
totally.
answers, ask questions and keep asking until you get the answers, and if you're not, there's probably a reason why.
And history repeats itself, so the only way to know where you're going is to know where you've come from. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're here and we're exploring the parallels in past events and how they all line up to be the same thing because we're literally living through those
Yeah.
past parallels right now. And I'm like, "Oh, no, are we gonna get flooded again?"
And well, I believe in this. Like I'm like, I'm not subscribing to that fear anymore. And also the
Yeah.
Anunnaki did not build the pyramids. That's going around and I just need to speak to that. Okay, moving on.
Steph, who built the pyramids? Who built
Well,
them?
I've always believed that it was Thoth and that it was and what I've read is it was created for the children of the Law of One to literally heal, bring them back,
Mhm.
initiate. Yes, I'm gonna say they were used as tombs later, but they were
They
not
were,
they were. They were
but
not
that's not their original intent.
because everybody says they were tombs, and I said, "Yes, for a very short period of time, but that is not the reason why they were built." There is also talk, and I will not take too long on this, but there is also talk of the pyramid being almost like a I'm not gonna use the right words. Um, made to create actual substances and minerals. So look
Mm,
into, if you haven't already, friends, the Land of Chem. I really love this guy. I am forgetting his name, but that is his podcast and his channel. And Chem is spelled Chem. He is a chemist, if I'm not wrong. He's a scientist. So he's looking at the scientifics behind these ancient civilizations and just some really cool information about the pyramids, why they're built with what they're built with. And I'm not just talking about the Great Pyramid, but multiple. He's
oh,
done
yeah, there's
analyses on
many
multiple
pyramids.
and looked at the stone that they're built with and the properties of the stone and what it actually does. So there's
Totally.
science behind it, my friends. Have a look, see, Lou.
Okay, beautiful. And to our listeners, I like write in. What do you want us to talk about? Where I mean, I know that Steph and are an endless well of ideas to talk about. But we want to know what you want to hear, and we want to explore all of these different ideas with you and learn as much as we can in this human experience that we're all living here together. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks, guys. Until the next one.
Oh, and don't forget to sign up for our members only
Yeah.
episodes. Yes, where you
There's
receive healing treatments bi-weekly. One for me, then Steph, then
yeah.
me, then Steph.
Only on Spotify, though.
Only on Spotify. We are probably going to expand at some point, but get it while the getting's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Sending all of our love. May peace be with you.
May peace be with you.